Hello, I'm going to be reading from The Speckled People, Part 3 or Chapter 3 by Hugo Hamilton. I'll give you the introduction though in case you haven't seen the other two. In one of the finest memoirs to have emerged from Ireland in many years, the acclaimed novelist Hugo Hamilton brings alive his German-Irish childhood in the 1950s Dublin, between his father's Irish strict nationalism and the softly spoken stories of his mother's German past. This little boy tells the tale of a whole family's homesickness for a country and a language they can call their own. 3. My mother's name is Irmgard, and she was in a big film once with lots of war and killing and trains on fire. It's a black and white picture that happened long ago in Germany. A man trapped her in a place called Venlo, where she was working and she couldn't escape. She says it was just like us being in the wardrobe, because she was far away from home and could not call for help. She couldn't write home or tell any of her sisters what was happening. She didn't know who to talk to. The man's name was Steigler, and he would not listen to her when she spoke to him, and he would not let her go. Instead, he told her to smile, and even though she was too afraid to smile, he just put his hand up to her lips and made her show her teeth, like a big unhappy grin. She can't talk about it any more than that. She's told nobody else. Not even her sisters, not even my father. One day, when we get older, we will hear the whole story, but now we're too small, and some things about Germany are not good to think about. That is a film you can see when you grow up, she says. All we need to know is that at the end of the film, when the war is over, my mother runs away to Ireland to go on a pilgrimage. She meets my father in Dublin, and they talk about everything except the time she was trapped once by the man in Venlo. They go back to Germany to get married with the snow all around. They travel through the white landscape and go to the mountains along the River Rhine called Drachenfels, and after that my father brings her back to Ireland, to another mountain close to the Atlantic called Croagh Patrick. And that's how the film ends, she says, because it's time to sleep. And she doesn't want us to keep calling her and asking more questions about Germany that she can't answer. The end, film over. She says the same thing sometimes when we start fighting over the leftovers of the cake bowl, or the time we went to the Strand and stayed there all day until it started raining, and she said it was a pity it had to end like that. Or when something breaks, like the time the blue vase that came from her father and mother's house in Kempen smashed in the hallway, and she said it was a very nice film, but now it was over. In my mother's film, she was in a building where there was nobody else living. At night, when everybody was gone, she was afraid and locked the door of her room. She knew that there was no point in shouting for help because nobody would hear her. Then she heard the man coming in, and there was nothing she could do except pray and hope that it would be all over someday. She could hear him coming up the stairs as if he was counting them on the way up. She could hear him breathing outside the door. She could see the doorknob turning, and she could smell cognac. During the day, The man was always nice to everybody. He looked very well, dressed in a suit and a clean shirt every morning, and he wore good shoes. He spoke kindly and shook hands with everyone when they arrived to work. He smiled and even remembered everybody's birthday. He brought flowers to work when somebody had bad news. Everybody said he was a good man during the day and full of compliments. He had read a lot of books, and he was very generous, giving presents of theatre tickets and opera tickets. But you can't always trust nice people. My mother says that sometimes there's no defence against kindness. It is easy to be taken in by compliments, by smiles, by nice words, but you can't let yourself be stung by things like flowers and theatre tickets and invitations to the opera. Everybody can make mistakes, but there are some mistakes you can't even talk about because you feel stupid that you can only blame yourself. My mother wants us never to be fooled by nice words. She wants us never to have things that we regret, because everybody in Germany has things in their heads that they keep to themselves. Everybody has things that they wish had never happened. When you're small, you can inherit a secret without even knowing what it is. You can be trapped in the same film as your mother because certain things are passed on to you that you're not even aware of. Not just a smile or a voice, but unspoken things too that you can't understand until later when you grow up. Maybe it's there in my eyes for all to see, the same as it's hidden in my mother's eyes. Maybe it's hidden in my voice or in the shape of my hands. Maybe it's something you carry with you, like a precious object you're told not to lose. That film will still be running when we grow up, she says. All we need to know for now is that she ran away to Ireland to become a pilgrim in a holy country with priests and donkeys that had crosses on their backs. She picked Ireland because she heard there were lots of monastic ruins. She didn't expect so much poverty, but the Irish people knew how to deal with poverty through celebration, with smoke and stories and singing. A man with a packet of cigarettes was a millionaire in Ireland, and the Irish people had never tried to hurt anyone, so maybe they would not pass judgment on a German woman. In the days before she left Germany, it was so exciting, she says, because nobody in her family had ever been that far away before. Everybody was talking about Ireland, even the neighbours asking what the weather was like and what the houses were like inside, what she should bring and what she didn't need. She said she packed and unpacked all over again so often that it was hard to believe she was going away at all in the end. At the station, she embraced her aunts Maria and her uncle Gerd and her younger sister Minnie. But it was hard to feel she was leaving. They all had tears in their eyes and would not let her get on the train because they thought she would never come back. They made her promise to write home every week, even when she was sitting down in her seat, even when the train carriages jerked and the train moved out of the station. It was still hard to feel anything except fear. Everybody in Germany was used to being afraid. She waved her hand slowly. She saw the houses and the fences and the fields passing by, but She still had the feeling that she was trapped. But then my mother says, there comes a moment when you don't care about anything, when all the fear and doubt disappears. It's a moment of weakness and strength at the same time, when nothing matters and you're not afraid anymore. Sometimes she still thinks about it as though it just happened yesterday, as though the film is never over and she'll never escape. Maybe the reason why people are good at stories is that they sometimes have things they can't tell, things that they must keep secret at all costs and make up for in other ways. So she tells us the story of the pilgrimage instead. She tells us how Ireland was a place where you could trust everyone, where people prayed every day, where you could go and say the rosary and make up for all the things that happened in the war. It was a great way for a film to come to an end, cycling along small roads with the sun slanting through the clouds like in holy pictures, lighting up the mountains like a stage in the opera house. It was flickering through the stone walls. Everywhere these stone walls, and everywhere the grass combed in one direction by the wind. Trees bent like old men, and everywhere so empty, except for the haystacks in the fields and the monastic ruins. Once or twice along the way there were cows on the road that made us stop completely. Big cow faces looking at her as if they were amazed to see a German woman in Ireland after the war. Then it started raining and getting dark, and she had to find a place to stay quickly. It was raining so much that the water was jumping away from her eyes. When she blinked and her shoulders were shivering, she got off the bicycle because it was impossible to go any further. A man pointed to a house that didn't even look like a guest house, but it was better to stay there because you couldn't see a thing anymore. There was a light on inside, and the woman of the house came to the door with lots of children behind her. One girl had her dress in her mouth, all of them staring as if my mother had come in with the rain. My mother says you can't be sure in Ireland if people say things with admiration or not. Irish people are good at saying things in between admiration and accusation, between envy and disdain. She says the woman looked her up and down as if she liked German clothes, but she didn't completely trust her. I have come from Louderg, my mother explained. That made everything right. She was a pilgrim coming to Ireland to pray for all the bad things that had happened in Europe. In the kitchen, they made her sit and eat a meal while they all watched, and the man of the house kept asking questions about Germany. Was it in ruins like they said in the papers? She had to describe the cities after the war. Nuremberg, Hamburg, Dresden. The woman of the house kept saying, "You're not serious. People in Germany wouldn't make up something like that." The children kept staring. They were so shy that they were afraid to move closer to her. It was like being a film actress. They spoke about her as if she was still in a film. "She'll have some more bread," the man of the house said. "She'll be needing a glass of whiskey," he said after she was finished eating, as if they had to celebrate the guest who came in with the rain. The man of the house raised his glass with the children looking up. "Heil Hitler," he said. There was a big smile on his face, my mother says, and she didn't know what to say. Of course, he was only being friendly. It was part of the Irish welcome. "Fair play to the Germans," he said. He said the Germans were great people altogether. He kept saying it was a pity they lost, because they were a mighty nation. He winked at her with admiration, then left a long silence, waiting to see how she would respond. "Fair play to the Germans for the almighty trusting you gave the British. Fair play to Hitler for that at least." He was only being hospitable to my mother, says, to make her feel at home. She could not argue with him. She was trapped inside German history and could not get out of it. Instead she smiled and said it had been a long journey back from Laufberg. She thanked them for such a lovely welcome, but said she could no longer keep her eyes open. She was given a room with a small fire going. Her clothes were still steaming. There was a smell of cabbage and damp walls. The bed sank down in the middle, for she was so tired that nothing mattered any more, and it didn't take long to fall asleep to the sound of the rain. She heard the voices of the children on the far side of the wall, and sometimes the man of the house too, speaking in a deep voice. The rain was whispering and bouncing into an enamel basin outside and rushing away into the drain, like the sound of the rosary being said all night. Some time later she woke up and saw the woman of the house standing beside the bed, holding a lamp gently shaking her arm. The woman explained that there was an emergency. Would she mind giving up the bed and spending the night in another room? There were 3 men soaked to the skin outside on the doorstep needing accommodation for the night. "I can't turn them away," the woman said. "Poor creatures." My mother says she had to get up and take her things to the family room, where the woman pointed to the marriage bed. The children were all fast asleep in another bed, and the room was in such a mess with clothes and newspapers on the floor, bits of food too, even a harness for a horse and a hay fork and Wellington boots. She stood there looking around as she couldn't believe her eyes. "It's all me topsy-turvy," the woman said. "But where's your husband?" "Oh, you have nothing to be afraid of, love. He'll stay by the fire." My mother says, "You can't complain if you're a pilgrim escaping from Germany." She says, "You have to offer things up for people who are less fortunate and for all the awful things that happen." So she just got into bed with the woman of the house. She felt the warmth left behind by the man of the house. She could hear the whole room breathing until the woman started speaking in the dark. She listened to the woman talking for a while, and then she began to talk as well, as if there were things that could only be said in the dark. She says she never saw the men. She heard them coming in and muttering for a while to each other in the room. She never saw the man of the house again either, but she heard him in the kitchen tapping his pipe against the fireplace. She heard the children dreaming sometimes, and the cows elbowing each other in the barn outside. She smelled the rain and heard it drumming on the roof, like somebody still saying the rosary. They whispered so as not to wake up the children. They talked for a long time, as if they were sisters. That's the end of 3, so before next time, sometime this week. Good night, God bless.